In Chapter 1, Pedin escapes Imperial guards after stealing silk and sticky buns, hiding in a chimney, and navigating the streets of Loot Alley. She returns to the fort, a makeshift shelter where she shares her spoils with Adina, her closest friend. Pedin reflects on her past, her former home, and the discrimination in the Kingdom of Ilya, where elites possess abilities granted by surviving the plague, while powerless ordinaries were purged under King Edric's decree. Pedin is secretly an ordinary living in hiding, a truth known only to Adina, who loyally keeps her secret. The two share a warm bond built over years of surviving the streets together, with Adina using Pedin's stolen fabric for sewing. Despite danger, Pedin remains skilled at theft and evasion, while both girls find solace in each other's company. The chapter ends with them resting in their barricaded home, joking about stolen comforts despite their harsh reality. In Chapter 2, Kai trains with his half-brother Kit, showcasing his exceptional ability to mimic and wield others' powers, including Kit's fire and water. Their sparring demonstrates Kai's skill and combat focus, contrasting Kit's future as king with Kai's role as his enforcer. Blair, the general's daughter and a powerful Tella, confronts Kai, hinting at their rivalry in the upcoming trials, which are only 2 weeks away. Kai demonstrates his dominance by reversing Blair's dagger telekinetically, emphasizing his strength and control. After training, the brothers relax in the castle kitchens, where they share banter with Gale, a longtime cook who has cared for them since childhood. Kai's injury and shirtless state add to his roguish demeanor, while Kit's warmth highlights their brotherly dynamic. Their lighthearted moment is interrupted when a young servant arrives, nervously summoning Kai to the throne room, signaling a shift from playful banter to pressing royal matters. In Chapter 3, Pedin navigates Loot Alley, stealing food and coins to survive. She skillfully robs an apprentice and discovers a secret note about a midnight meeting at her former home, raising suspicion. Haunted by memories of her father and bonded with Adina through years of survival, Pedin reflects on their lives as thieves and seamstresses. On the street, she witnesses a young boy being brutally beaten by an Imperial guard recalling her own punishments. Soon after, she encounters a lecherous guard who demands proof of her psychic ability. Using her keen observation skills, she manipulates him into believing her, escaping with stolen fabric despite being slapped. Returning toward the fort, she notices banners announcing the upcoming purging trials, an event where elites display powers in deadly competitions. Pedin bitterly reflects on the trial's brutality, rigged nature, and her gratitude for being ordinary, safely overlooked in a world that glorifies violence and power. In Chapter 4, Pedin and Adina share a brief meal behind the fort, with Pedin warning her friend to be cautious after noticing fewer guards in the area. Later, Pedin heads into Loot Alley to steal goods and finds success, pickpocketing and swiping valuables. Her night escalates when she targets a tall, confident stranger, clearly an elite, carrying a money pouch. She stages a collision to get close, successfully stealing half his coins while distracting him with playful banter. The man's striking gray eyes, calloused hands, and battle scars intrigue her, but she maintains her composure, masking the theft with charm before slipping away into the crowd. Pedin reflects on her observations of him, an imposing and mysterious figure, while savoring her victory, certain he won't miss the stolen coins. In Chapter 5, Kai is summoned by King Edric, his father, to carry out a mission as the future enforcer. Locate and execute an ordinary being harbored in Loot Alley and banish those aiding her. At dawn, Kai rides with 2 Imperials to a small shack, where he discovers a hidden trapdoor beneath a rug, revealing a young girl named Abigail. Her adoptive family, Nathan, Layla, and their sons, are arrested, and Kai is expected to execute Abigail while the others are banished to the Scorches. Instead, Kai secretly spares her life, cutting her bindings and reuniting her with her family in the desert. He frees them all and gives Abigail a small ornate knife, telling her to use it wisely. Kai officially declares their banishment, watching them walk into the Scorches, knowing their survival is unlikely. The act reveals Kai's hidden compassion, despite his brutal role as his father's feared enforcer. In Chapter 6, Kai wanders Loot Alley, observing life in the slums. He collides with Pedin, who hides her identity, and they exchange flirtatious banter. Kai is intrigued, but cannot sense her power, suspecting she might be an ordinary. Yet he lets her go. After she disappears into the crowd, Kai realizes his coin pouch is lighter. She pickpocketed him. Soon, he's ambushed in an alley by 4 attackers, 2 brawnies, a blazer, and a crawler. Using their powers against them, he fights back, injuring several. However, a powerful silencer suddenly appears, stripping him of his abilities and overwhelming him with pain. Kai collapses, his vision blurring as a crowd gathers to watch. He feels powerless and humiliated, suspecting they may be celebrating his downfall as he fades into unconsciousness. This marks Kai's first encounter with the dangerous silencer and highlights Pedon's skill and boldness in evading suspicion. In Chapter 7, Pedon spots a crowd watching Kai fight multiple attackers. A silencer incapacitates him, but Pedon intervenes, defeating the silencer in a brutal fight fueled by memories of her father's murder by the king. She knocks the silencer unconscious, drawing shocked whispers from the crowd as Imperials arrive and bow to Kai, revealing his identity as the feared prince and future enforcer. Realizing she stole from him, Pedon tries to slip away but is caught. Kai pins her against a wall, interrogating her about her power when he cannot sense it. She pretends to be a weak psychic, cleverly using observations to convince him. Intrigued, Kai thanks her and learns her name, Pedon, giving her a coin as a token. Their interaction becomes playful yet tense, with Kai acknowledging her skills before leaving. This encounter forges a dangerous connection, as Pedon hides her true status as an ordinary while evading suspicion. In Chapter 8, Pedon returns to the fort where Adina bombards her with questions about the fight with the silencer and saving Prince Kai. Pedon explains everything, including stealing from him and lying about being a psychic, which alarms Adina. They spend the evening quietly talking before Adina teasingly asks about Kai's looks, earning a blanket over her face. At dawn, Pedon heads into Loot Alley, but instead of being invisible as usual, she finds herself the center of attention. People whisper, point, and even clap, calling her the Silver Savior, after word of her fight spreads. As she moves through the marketplace, a large banner announces the contestants for the upcoming purging trials. Scanning the names, she freezes when she sees her own listed as a contestant. In Chapter 9, Kai tortures a captured silencer in the palace dungeon, but learns nothing. Frustrated, he meets with King Edric and Kit, where the king orders him to extract information or kill the prisoner, blaming the resistance and vowing to destroy them for supporting ordinaries. Later, Kai trains with Kit, struggling to focus, and Jax joins them, revealing his excitement about making the trials. Blair and Sadie arrive, confirming they are also competitors, and Kit shows a flyer listing all contestants. Kai is stunned to see Pedon's name at the bottom of the list. The revelation that both his adopted brother Jax and Pedon will compete in the deadly purging trials adds new stakes, forcing Kai to balance his mission, survival, and concern for those he cares about. In Chapter 10, Pedon is stunned to see her name on the purging trials banner, realizing she's been chosen to compete and likely die. An Imperial arrives to escort her to the palace for training and events leading up to the trials. She rushes to say goodbye to Adina, who is devastated but urges Pedon to survive and promises to wait for her. Pedon recalls her father's early training, teaching her to fake being a psychic to survive as an ordinary. After an emotional farewell, she leaves Loot Alley and boards a coach with other contestants. She meets Ace Elway, a proud illusionist, and Hera, a shy Veil who demonstrates her invisibility. Pedon maintains her psychic cover story, explaining her supposed ability to sense emotions, while Ace mocks her presence in the trials. Despite the tension, Pedon shows confidence, determined to face the deadly competition even as fear lingers beneath her composure. In Chapter 11, Pedon arrives at the palace with Ace and Hera, led by a friendly Imperial named Lenny. She's given a lavish room and spends 2 days isolated, growing anxious about the upcoming trials. When Lenny announces she'll have dinner with the king, queen, and other contestants, she prepares with help from a shy maid named Ellie. While getting ready, she meets Prince Kit, Kai's brother and heir to the throne, who surprises her with his charm. At dinner, Pedon is introduced to the other contestants, Andy, Braxton, Jax, Sadie, Blair, Ace, and Hera. Blair's cold demeanor stands out, while Andy's friendliness offers relief. Pedon notices most contestants are well-connected elites, making her stand out as a slum-born psychic. The chapter ends with Kai addressing her directly, emphasizing their previous encounter and highlighting the tension between them, setting the stage for future dynamics within the trials. In Chapter 12, Kai observes Pedon at dinner, intrigued by her composure and confidence. The king and queen formally welcome the contestants, and the king questions Pedon, impressed by her psychic abilities and connection to her father, Adam Gray, a former palace healer. After the meal, Kai volunteers to escort Padden to her room, leading to a tense exchange. When Kai examines her injured lip, Padden overpowers him, pinning him to the wall and holding his own dagger to his throat. Kai disarms her in turn, pressing her knife to her neck. They exchange sharp banter, each warning the other, but ultimately return each other's weapons, acknowledging their rivalry. The encounter leaves Kai fascinated by her skill, confidence, and defiance. He recognizes Padden as a dangerous and unpredictable opponent, and their mutual tension foreshadows their growing connection amid the deadly trials. In Chapter 13, Padden trains in the palace yard alongside other contestants, feeling sore and out of shape, but determined to prepare for the trials. She practices striking targets and throwing knives, reflecting on her father's training and the upcoming interviews where contestants must impress the kingdom. Tension rises when Kai throws a knife near her, sparking a sharp exchange. Blair interrupts by deliberately cutting Padden's ear with a blade, marking her as a target. Kai intervenes, surprising Padden with unexpected gentleness as he tucks her hair back, then braids it to keep blood from matting it. Their interaction is laced with banter and tension, showing Kai's protective side and Padden's defiance. He warns her to get the wound healed before the interviews and pointedly references Blair's mark. The encounter highlights the growing complexity of their dynamic, the hostility among contestants, and the looming threat of the trials, leaving Padden unsettled yet intrigued by Kai's actions. In Chapter 14, Padden prepares for the Purging Trials interviews with Ellie's help, dressing elegantly to impress the audience. She joins the other contestants and is escorted to the bowl arena, observing its size, the mute-protected stands, and the king's viewing box. In the waiting area, she talks with Andy, learning Andy is Kit and Kai's cousin. As the arena fills with thousands of spectators, contestants are called one by one to be interviewed by Tila, the charismatic host, and demonstrate their abilities. Jack showcases his blink teleportation. Braxton demonstrates brute strength. Ace displays illusions. Sadie clones herself. Blair uses telekinesis. Hera vanishes with Tila, and Andy impresses the crowd by shape-shifting into multiple animals. Kai captivates the audience by skillfully using others' abilities, leaving Padden for last. She walks toward the stage under the weight of the crowd's attention, prepared to maintain her psychic persona while hiding her true identity as an ordinary. In Chapter 15, Padden takes the stage for her interview with Tila, facing the king, queen, and Kit watching from above. She recounts saving Kai, earning laughter and favor from the crowd, and explains her supposed psychic ability that protects her from silencers. Padden openly describes the harsh realities of life in the slums, earning sympathy, but pivots to confidence by claiming her survival skills prepare her for the trials. When asked what she expects from the trials, she boldly answers survival, shocking the audience. For her demonstration, Padden cleverly reads people from the crowd using careful observation, impressing everyone with personal details and earning cheers. The attention cements her reputation as the Silver Savior, but also highlights how the trials are a spectacle. Padden realizes she must manipulate the crowd's perception to survive, masking her disgust and fear with confidence, and silently vows to use the game's attention and admiration to her advantage. In Chapter 16, Kai reflects on his brutal training and interrogation work, frustrated after days of torturing a silencer named Micah without results. He joins dinner, still bloodstained, sparring verbally with Padden as Queen Alora announces that contestants must pair for the upcoming ball before each trial. The next morning, Kai encounters Padden in the hall, sharing a rare, playful breakfast moment in the kitchens with Gale, the palace cook, which reveals a softer side of him and earns Padden's laughter. Later, during training, Kai and Kit jog and spar, hinting at Kit's frustration over his restricted role as heir and their contrasting duties. Back in the training yard, Kai notices Padden's sloppy, frustrated fighting and steps in to correct her form, physically guiding her punches and emphasizing technique. Their tense yet charged interaction showcases Padden's progress, Kai's growing fascination, and the bond forming between them, even as they remain competitors in the looming deadly trials. In Chapter 17, Kai spars with Padden in a brutal hand-to-hand fight that draws the attention of other contestants. Padden pushes him to fight without powers, showing her determination and skill. They exchange blows fiercely, both sustaining injuries, though Kai restrains his strength. Padden uses cunning tactics, including a headbutt and a throw, managing to pin Kai multiple times. She taunts him for holding back, using her psychic perception to read him, and proves her combat ability despite being outmatched in power. The match becomes a mix of fighting and tension, with Kai impressed by her relentlessness and creativity. When it ends, Pedin warns him not to show her mercy, throwing a knife near him as a challenge to impress her next time. Kai is left grinning at her boldness, recognizing her as a formidable opponent. The scene cements their mutual respect and rivalry while furthering the charged dynamic between them before the deadly trials. In Chapter 18, Pedin reflects on the trial's psychological stakes, determined to win public favor to survive. Over dinner, tension lingers among contestants after a brawl between Ace and Braxton. Kai teases Pedin about her nervous habits, deepening their charged dynamic. Later, Queen Avalyn announces the upcoming ball, prompting Pedin to seek Ellie's help with her gown. Kit intercepts her in the hallway, praising her candid interview answer about survival, and surprising her by asking her to be his partner for the balls. Recognizing the political advantage, she agrees, playing her role to gain the people's support. With Ellie, Pedin arranges to have a gown made, but suggests bringing her friend Adina, a skilled seamstress from Lute, to the palace. Ellie agrees to speak with Lenny about escorting her. Overwhelmed with hope and guilt for having forgotten Adina, Pedin reflects on their bond and her friend's loyalty. Her relief is interrupted by a knock at her door. In Chapter 19, Pedin is surprised by Kai's late-night visit, where he insists on giving her dance lessons for the upcoming ball with Kit. Despite resistance, she agrees, and he leads her to his personal room, revealing a more intimate and lived-in side of him. They practice waltzing, their banter laced with tension and closeness, and Pedin negotiates a question in exchange for another dance. She asks if he wishes he were heir, and Kai simply answers no. The next morning, Lenny escorts Pedin to Lute to bring back her best friend Adina as her personal seamstress. Overjoyed, Adina eagerly accepts, and the two share heartfelt moments on their way back, with Pedin silently burdened by guilt for not visiting her sooner. Adina is thrilled Pedin is attending the ball with Kit and enthusiastically begins planning her dress, eager to make her stand out, while Pedin hints at a different color choice. In Chapter 20, Kai narrates the first ball of the purging trials, an elaborate event beginning with a banquet. He attends with Blair, while Kit escorts Pedin, who shocks the ballroom by wearing a striking silver gown instead of the traditional green, making a bold statement. Tension brews at the contestants' table as Blair mocks Pedin's background, prompting Pedin's sharp retort and Blair's drawn knife, which Kai diffuses using a tele ability. Ace taunts Pedin for her goal of survival, heightening the hostility until Kit intervenes, asking Pedin to dance. Kai watches them closely, conflicted by jealousy and attraction, remembering their private moments. Blair pulls him into a dance, and he distracts himself by dancing with other women, but his attention keeps returning to Pedin, their locked gazes sparking tension. Kai reflects on his possessive feelings for her despite her being his competitor and his brother's partner, acknowledging the dangerous attraction that continues to consume him. In Chapter 21, Pedin attends the royal ball in a bold silver gown, standing out among the green-clad women. She dances with Kit, who expresses admiration for her authenticity, and with other nobles, including an inappropriate young man. Kai intervenes, cutting in to dance with her, and their banter reveals a growing tension between them. Pedin spots a familiar boy from Lute linked to a mysterious note in leather armor just before chaos erupts. Explosions rock the ballroom, and masked attackers, later revealed as ordinaries, storm in. Kai shields Pedin with his force field and insists on taking her to safety despite her protests, ultimately carrying her over his shoulder. Pedin recognizes one of the attackers as the boy from Lute, confirming their involvement. Amid the chaos, Kai clashes with Kit, demanding he leave for his own safety. Kit reluctantly complies, and Kai heads back into battle wielding fire, while Pedin is escorted to safety. In Chapter 22, Pedin hides in a crowded safe room with Kit, the king, and queen after the attack. Kit, agitated and guilt-ridden for staying behind, confides in her about the resistance, a growing network of ordinaries working with powerful exiled fatals against the kingdom. He admits understanding their motives, but believes their eradication is necessary for elite survival. Pedin urges him to question that belief, and their conversation reveals his desire to fight rather than rule. The king announces the trials will proceed despite the attack, projecting strength. Pedin slips away, returning to the ballroom, now being cleaned of blood and rubble. She finds Kai injured with a knife in his back and helps remove it, watching him heal himself. They exchange sharp banter and discuss the attack, casualties, and suspicions that the Resistance's real mission remains unclear. Kai departs, warning her to stay alive, while Padden resolves to survive and find the Resistance. In Chapter 23, Kai wakes in the Whispers Forest, drugged and wearing a tight leather band around his arm. The first trial has begun. A poem explains contestants must collect bands from others to win, forcing deadly combat over the next 6 days. Armed with only minimal gear, Kai navigates the forest, finding water, supplies, and a weapon stash left to intensify the competition. While reflecting on Padden and the danger of their growing connection, Kai sets up camp but is soon ambushed by Braxton. The two engage in a brutal fight, with Braxton temporarily gaining the upper hand and burning Kai over the fire to weaken him. Kai recovers, overpowers Braxton, and takes his band, sparing his life and telling him to flee. Exhausted and severely burned, Kai tends to his wounds, determined to survive, find medical herbs, and continue the trials, knowing failure or death is not an option. In Chapter 24, Padden wakes in the Whispers Forest, unprepared and lightly dressed, forced to survive the trial. She crafts arrows and hunts a rabbit while navigating the dangerous terrain. She discovers a pool and is horrified by what appears to be Kit's lifeless body, only to realize it's an illusion. Soon, she's surrounded by multiple illusions of herself as a starving child, confirming Ace's power. Ace confronts her, offering to take her band without harming her, but she refuses. Using her observation skills, she identifies the real Ace by a bead of sweat and shoots him in the leg. During his attack, he cuts her across the stomach with a spear. Padden flees, bleeding and in severe pain, managing to wrap the wound with a torn shirt as she stumbles through the forest in search of water. Injured but alive, she focuses on survival while the trials grow increasingly deadly. In Chapter 25, Padden stumbles through the Whispers, bleeding heavily from her spear wound and near collapse as she searches for water. She finds an unattended fire and a creek, but is confronted by Kai. Despite aiming her bow at him, her strength fails, and she collapses. Kai catches her panicked and calls her Pai, revealing deep concern as he examines her injuries. He carefully searches for the source of her bleeding, lifting her shirt to reveal the deep wound beneath her ribcage. Kai cuts away the blood-soaked fabric, his face tight with worry, while Padden drifts in and out of consciousness. He orders her to stay awake, his mask of composure shattered by fear for her life, and continues trying to keep her alive as she fades. Padden, delirious and weak, can only register his rare tenderness as darkness overtakes her, leaving Kai desperately determined to save her. In Chapter 26, Kai tends to a severely wounded and delirious Padden, finding a lost healer's salve from his earlier fight with Braxton and using it to save her life. He stitches her gash, calming her pain with teasing banter and distracting conversation. As he works, Padden reveals pieces of her past, including her father teaching her to fight, her mother's death, and her survival with Adina in Loot. She admits Ace ambushed and injured her with illusions, haunting her deeply, but she chose not to kill him. Kai reflects on his own violent reputation, his growing attachment to Padden, and his feelings of unworthiness even as he continues to protect her. He feeds and hydrates her, then moves her closer to the fire, quietly vowing to keep her safe. Watching her sleep, Kai wrestles with his desire for her and the reality of their roles as enemies, feeling conflicted yet deeply drawn to her. In Chapter 27, Padden wakes healed but surprised Kai didn't take her band. He proposes they partner, and she reluctantly agrees. Padden tends to Kai's burn with a homemade salve, and they exchange stories. Kai reveals his brutal upbringing, his father's torture training, and his acceptance of his role as the future enforcer, contrasting it with Kit's path to kingship. Their growing trust and banter lighten the mood, but tension lingers. Suddenly 5 wolves surround them. Despite Kai's protests, Padden joins the fight, killing one with an arrow, while Kai dispatches the others with brutal efficiency. He saves her from a final attack with a throwing star, but both are left bloodied. Kai with a severe bite wound. Padden tends to him, and their mutual attraction intensifies as they continue caring for each other. The chapter shows their alliance strengthening, their personal walls lowering, and their dynamics shifting from rivals to partners in survival. In Chapter 28, 3 uneventful days pass as Kai and Padden recover from their injuries and search unsuccessfully for other contestants. At their campsite, they share stories and playful banter that deepen their connection. Pedin tends Kai's wounds with homemade salves, and he opens up about his brutal training under his father and his acceptance of his role as the future enforcer, while Pedin shares memories of her father and life in Loot. Their bond grows as they dance under the stars, revealing trust and attraction beneath their rivalry. Pedin demonstrates her skill by stealing Braxton's band from Kai mid-dance, and they exchange questions about their pasts, families, and favorite things, strengthening their understanding of each other. Tension rises as Kai questions why Pedin spared him, and she admits she didn't want to damn him. Just as they start to acknowledge their complicated feelings, a mysterious woman interrupts, demanding something they both have. In Chapter 29, Kai and Pedin are ambushed by Sadie, who surrounds them with duplicates and demands their bands. Kai discreetly gives Pedin a throwing star, which she uses to stab Sadie and escape. The fight escalates as Kai creates duplicates of himself to battle Sadie's copies, while Pedin takes down 2 of them and faces the real Sadie. They exchange brutal blows, but Pedin is overpowered and pinned, with Sadie poised to kill her. At the last moment, Kai fatally stabs Sadie from behind, causing her duplicates to vanish. The shock of Sadie's death overwhelms Pedin, who is haunted by memories of her father's death. Kai distracts her with teasing comments and reassurances, calming her as she trembles from the encounter. He helps her sit, comforts her by spinning her ring, and urges her to stay put and recover from the shock while he cleans up the scene, showing his experience with violence. In Chapter 30, Pedin struggles to calm herself after Sadie's death while Kai quietly disposes of the body. When he returns, she notices dirt and pollen on his hands, realizing he buried Sadie and placed flowers on her grave. Kai comforts Pedin and she thanks him for saving her life, admitting she feels overwhelmed. He expresses that he would save her again and she gives back Braxton's band, but he insists she keep it. Their conversation grows intimate, and Kai teases her before pulling her close to share warmth. His gentle, hesitant hold and quiet reassurances help distract Pedin from the trauma of the fight, and she begins to understand he is intentionally comforting her. She reflects on Kai's calculating nature and is surprised by his care for her. The chapter ends with them lying together by the fire, Pedin realizing that Kai is her distraction from the darkness of the trials. In Chapter 31, Kai and Pedin receive a cryptic note to meet at the edge of the Whispers at sunrise. On their way, they encounter Jax and Andy, who recount their own battles, including fights with Blair, Hera, Ace, and Braxton. Together, they head toward the forest's edge where an audience awaits. As they approach the clearing, Blair, Braxton, and Hera attack, forcing the group into separate battles. Kai pursues Ace, using multiple abilities to counter his illusions, while Pedin, Andy, and Jax fight the others. During the fight, Pedin is gravely injured, distracting Kai and allowing Ace to pin him down. With Jax's help, Kai escapes and kills Ace with a throwing star, only to discover Ace used an illusion, and he has fatally struck Jax instead. The chapter ends with Kai kneeling over his dying brother, shocked and horrified, as the reality of his mistake sinks in. In Chapter 32, Kai is horrified to realize he accidentally struck Jax with a throwing star due to Ace's illusion. As Jax collapses, Kai cradles him, desperate to save his younger brother. Determined to get help, Kai carries Jax toward the crowd outside the trial arena, knowing a healer will be among them. He channels Braxton's strength to run faster, and reaches close enough to tap into a healer's power. Pulling the star from Jax's chest, Kai uses the ability to mend the fatal wound, leaving only a scar. Jax remains unresponsive, and Kai panics until Jax suddenly awakens, joking weakly about Kai's attack. Relieved, Kai hugs him tightly as the drums and cheers of the crowd signal sunrise and the completion of the first purging trial. The chapter closes with Jax alive, Kai emotionally shaken, and the trials moving forward after a brutal and harrowing victory. In Chapter 33, 3 days after the brutal trial, Pedin and the 6 other surviving contestants are seated in the bowl, where the audience watches highlights of their battles. The crowd cheers and reacts to their fights, injuries, and alliances, especially Pedin's interactions with Kai, though his burial of Sadie remains unseen. Hera's death is revealed, and the trial's brutality is glorified. Later, Pedin is escorted by Kit, who leads her through the castle's hidden hallways to the gardens. Surrounded by vibrant flowers, they share an honest conversation about the purging, the suffering of the slums, and Kit's potential as a future king. Pedin challenges him about Ilya's injustices, and Kit listens, even promising to redistribute wasted money from the garden fountain. Their talk eases into playful banter, ending in a water fight that leaves them both laughing. Despite her role as a spy and ordinary, Peyton reflects on Kit's kindness and the potential for change in Ilya. In Chapter 34, Pedden sneaks out of the palace at night and returns to her childhood home, following a clue from Finn's note. Inside, she encounters Lenny, who reveals himself as part of the Resistance. He leads her through a hidden passage to a secret underground base, where she meets Callum, his daughter Mira, Lena, and Finn. Callum explains that her father, Adam Gray, was one of the Resistance's founding leaders and kept its existence hidden to protect her. The Resistance, composed of ordinaries and sympathetic elites, seeks justice, truth, and freedom from the king's oppression. They clarify that the ball attack was unplanned and resulted in heavy losses. Their next plan is to infiltrate the bowl during the final trial using secret tunnels, and they need Pedden to gain access through her connection with Kit. Callum reads her mind to confirm her loyalty, then assures her her father would be proud. Peyton accepts, determined to help. In Chapter 35, nearly a week has passed since the first trial ended, and Kai has been consumed by training and anger, haunted by stabbing Jax and killing Micah. Determined to master the silencer ability, he pushes himself relentlessly. Pedden interrupts his training, challenging him to an archery match. Confident at first, Kai quickly realizes she is far better than him, and their competition turns into a playful yet charged game of distraction. Kai attempts to throw her aim off with close contact, but Pedden retaliates, teasing him with light, deliberate touches that leave him shaken and craving her. Their chemistry escalates as Kai grabs her wrists and pulls her closer, guiding her hand to his arm, admitting how deeply her touch affects him. She smirks, acknowledging his reaction, but their connection lingers heavily in the air. This moment deepens their bond, revealing growing intimacy and tension between them amid the deadly trials. In Chapter 36, Pedden continues building trust with Kit, spending time with him in the kitchens and around the castle while secretly gathering information for the Resistance. She suggests Kit visit Lute to see his people, planting seeds of doubt about the king's isolationist control. Kit hesitates, but considers her offer. Their conversation is interrupted by the king, who coldly warns Pedden to stay away from his sons and reminds her of her low status. Pedden hides her hatred, masking her desire for revenge, and plays the obedient contestant. Later, Adina and Ellie help her prepare for the next ball, dressing her in a striking red gown with her father's dagger displayed. Adina teases Pedden about her growing closeness with Kai, though Pedden remains conflicted. The chapter ends with Lenny arriving to escort her, solidifying the tension between her role in the trials, her resistance mission, and her relationships with the princes. In Chapter 37, Peyton attends the second Purging Trials ball in the palace gardens, wearing a striking red gown. She dances with Kit before being approached by Kai, who is drunk and flirty. After spilling wine on him, she takes him aside to clean his shirt, and their banter turns intimate as Kai teasingly touches her, revealing his growing feelings. They share a charged dance, but Pedden suffers a panic attack in the crowded ballroom. Kai quickly leads her out under a willow tree, loosens her corset laces to help her breathe, and distracts her with humor, showing unexpected care. After calming her, he helps retie her dress and insists on walking her back to her rooms, ending the evening with a rare moment of warmth and gentleness. The encounter deepens their complicated bond, with Pedden torn between her mission, her feelings, and Kai's unexpected vulnerability. In Chapter 38, Kai and Kit sit drinking together at the ball, joking about Jax and Andy dancing, but eventually discussing deeper matters. Kit notices Kai's shirt stain, leading to talk of Pedden and her fiery personality, with Kit admitting he wants to know her better. Kai hides his feelings for Pedden, but is clearly affected by her. Their conversation shifts to Kai's missions, revealing that although he kills under the king's orders, he spares ordinary children, haunted by his first kill at 14. The brothers share a rare moment of honesty and closeness. Suddenly, the crowd begins moving toward the training grounds, where a surprise fight is being set up, and contestants, including Kai's brothers and Ace, gather around the ring. Kit warns Kai to be careful before the next trial, telling him not to die. Kai reassures him, showing their bond as tension builds ahead of the upcoming challenges. In Chapter 39, Pedden changes out of her gown and is escorted by Lenny to an impromptu public brawl organized at the ball to let guests see the contestants fight. Taylor announces random matchups, and Kai narrowly defeats Braxton, followed by Andy defeating Ace in wolf form. Pedden is then chosen to fight Blair, realizing the king may have arranged it. Kai discreetly gives her tactical advice to stay agile, use her wits, and distract Blair. During the fight, Blair uses her telekinetic power to hurl weapons and debris at Pedden, injuring her and lifting her into the air before slamming her down. Pedden cleverly distracts Blair with a thrown knife and rock, tackling her to the ground and landing hard punches that leave Blair bloodied and humiliated. Enraged, Blair throws Pedden aside and storms off to a healer. Despite losing the match, Pedden laughs, proud of making Blair lose face in front of the crowd. In Chapter 40, Kai wakes on Plummet Mountain alongside Andy, Braxton, and Blair, realizing this is the second trial. A note reveals they must work as teams to climb to the top in 12 hours. Exhausted from the previous night's fights, they start the climb, watched by sights. Tension rises between Blair and Andy, but Kai intervenes to keep them focused. Hours into the ascent, Andy is bitten by a venomous snake when the group is ambushed by dozens of serpents. Using Blair's telekinetic power, Kai and Blair hurl the snakes away, saving Andy from further bites. Kai examines her injury, relieved she isn't showing signs of poisoning yet, but she struggles to walk. He insists she ride on his back despite her protests, while Blair grudgingly pushes the group onward. They continue their climb as night falls, facing exhaustion, distrust, and danger, knowing this trial tests both teamwork and endurance. In Chapter 41, Pedden climbs Plummet Mountain with Jax and Ace, aware the king deliberately paired them to create tension. Ace taunts her, then creates an illusion of a giant snake, causing Pedden to slip and nearly fall to her death. Jax uses his blink ability to save her, calming her rage toward Ace. As they climb, Jax reveals Kai's fear of heights and the king's cruel training methods, sharing memories of Kai returning home bloodied as a boy. Their conversation is interrupted by tremors that escalate into a rock slide. The trio scrambles for safety. Jax blinks to evade boulders, while Pedden narrowly avoids being crushed. She's struck on the head, bleeding and disoriented, but manages to survive as the mountain finally settles. Jax confirms he's okay, while Ace mocks her concern. Despite injuries and growing exhaustion, Pedden continues climbing, determined not to die on the mountain or let the trials break her. In Chapter 42, Kai struggles up Plummet Mountain, exhausted, injured, and hungover, carrying a poisoned Andy on his back while Braxton climbs alongside them. Kai keeps Andy awake by talking to her as they ascend the steep, rocky terrain under moonlight, determined to reach the top. After hours of climbing, they finally pull themselves onto the mountain's plateau, surrounded by sights observing their progress. A battered green flag atop a wooden pole stands as the centerpiece of the peak. Moments later, Jax, Ace, and Pedden climb up the opposite side, both teams meeting in tense silence. A sight reads a message revealing the twist. Although they were forced to work as teams, only one contestant can win by capturing the flag. The trials were never meant to be fair. This was designed for maximum tension and spectacle. As the shock settles in, the competitors shift their focus from cooperation to survival, and chaos erupts. In Chapter 43, chaos erupts as the two teams clash in a brutal fight for the flag. Pedden focuses on Ace, landing a powerful punch and breaking his nose before he traps her in an illusion and strangles her with a branch. She fakes unconsciousness, luring him close, then reverses his attack, snapping his arm and pinning him. Surrounded by illusions of herself, she rejects Ace's attempt to manipulate her and prepares to kill him. But when Kai arrives, she realizes Ace's life isn't hers to take. Pedden steps aside, giving Kai his chance for revenge. Kai urges her to seize victory instead, and she sprints toward the flag. As Kai turns his fury on Ace, Pedden climbs the rocks, reaching the top. With the battle raging behind her, no one stops her from grabbing the flag. She claims victory in the trial, solidifying her strength and determination in the deadly competition. In Chapter 44, Kai reflects on killing Ace during the second trial, feeling relief and clarity after avenging both Jax and Pedden. He recalls how Pedden gave him the chance to take Ace's life and how he diverted Blair's fatal attack meant for Pedden, saving her while sacrificing Braxton. Over 3 days of intense training with Damien, Kai uses physical and mental strain to distract himself. In a tense meeting with the king and Kit, the king warns Kai to ensure victory in the trials, threatening consequences if he fails. Kai defends Pedden's victory, angering his father, and storms out. Kit confronts Kai, insisting their father's actions are for the best, but Kai lashes out, recounting the torture and fear-based training that shaped him into a weapon. He challenges Kit to think independently rather than relying on the king, then leaves, showing his growing resentment and defiance toward his father's control. In Chapter 45, Peyton visits the quiet palace gardens at night, seeking solitude under the willow tree, but finds Kai already there. After playful banter, she joins him, and they share a rare moment of calm, talking about their childhoods. Kai opens up about his brutal training, revealing how his father forced him to heal his own injuries, shaping him into a weapon. Their shared understanding of growing up hardened by circumstance deepens their bond. To lighten the mood, Kai teaches Pedin thumb wars, leading to playful competition and laughter as they tease each other about their preferences, like Kai's hatred of blueberries and Pedin's love for them. Their banter grows intimate as Kai's gentle touch and words hint at his feelings, creating tension between them. Pedin eventually decides to leave, but Kai drapes his jacket over her shoulders, their quiet connection lingering as they part. In Chapter 46, Peyton spends time with Adina and Ellie as Adina works on her final ball gown. Kit unexpectedly arrives, asking Pedin to take him to loot. Despite knowing she is manipulating him to find the tunnels, Pedin feels guilty over his trust. Kit leads her through a hidden passage concealed in a dungeon cell, revealing a secret door and unlocking it with a key he keeps on him. They travel through the tunnel to the Bowl Arena and ride a horse out to loot disguised in plain clothes. Kit is shocked by the poverty, child thieves, and punishment posts, while Pedin explains life in the slums, revealing her own scars from being beaten as a child. She takes him to her makeshift shelter, the fort, showing him where she once lived. Deeply moved, Kit thanks her for trusting him, while Pedin wrestles with guilt over betraying his trust to help her people. In Chapter 47, Pedin meets with the Resistance in her childhood home, now used as their base. She informs Callum, Lena, Finn, and Lenny that she has successfully located the secret tunnel leading from the castle dungeon to the Bowl Arena, detailing its layout and entrances. Lena documents the information, while Peyton explains that access requires a key, which Kit always carries. She proposes stealing it during the upcoming ball and passing it to Lenny so the Resistance can infiltrate through the training grounds entrance. The group finalizes plans, preparing for the mission and the upcoming trial. Later, Pedin and Lenny leave together, sharing a quiet moment under the stars. Lenny jokes about her nickname, calling her the Silver Savior, and praising her courage, while Pedin reflects on her uncertain identity as she braces for the final ball and trial, both of which will determine the fate of her people. In Chapter 48, Kai has a vivid nightmare filled with screams and visions of death. He races through the castle, following cries for help, and finds Pedin covered in blood, pressing her dagger into her own chest while begging him to stop her pain. Overwhelmed, Kai tries to save her, but she continues sobbing and pleading for death. The scene spirals into horror as Kai sees Jax appear mortally wounded, followed by the spirits of those he has killed, surrounding him with hatred. Kai's panic intensifies as he hears the sound of Pedin's dagger piercing her heart. She collapses with a serene smile, and Kai screams, cradling her lifeless body, consumed by grief, guilt, and despair. The nightmare ends with him feeling hollow and dead inside, haunted by visions of those he has lost and killed, emphasizing the depth of his trauma, emotional torment, and fear of losing Pedin. In Chapter 49, Pedin is drawn to Kai's room after hearing his anguished cries, finding him trapped in a nightmare. She wakes him, but he reacts instinctively, pinning her down with a dagger at her throat. Pedin calmly reassures him, and Kai regains control, horrified by the small cut he left on her neck. He gently tends to her wound, and they share a moment of vulnerability, their connection deepening. Pedin starts to leave, but Kai quietly pleads for her to stay, surprising her. She chooses to remain, slipping under his covers, and he wraps his arms around her, offering warmth and comfort. They settle close together, exchanging soft words, with Kai thanking her sincerely and playfully braiding her hair as she drifts to sleep. The chapter emphasizes Kai's haunted state, Pedin's growing affection, and their mutual trust, marking a turning point in their relationship where closeness becomes intentional rather than circumstantial. In Chapter 50, Kai reflects on waking to Pedin sleeping beside him after she comforted him through his nightmare, deeply affected by her trust and his near loss of control. He quietly leaves to bring her breakfast, but their morning quickly becomes charged with tension and attraction. They flirt and tease, but as their closeness intensifies, Peden abruptly stops him, pressing a shoe to his throat and deciding to leave. Kai masks his hurt with bitterness, and she softly reminds him no one should endure nightmares alone before walking away. That evening at the ball, Kai drinks heavily and broods over his feelings. When Peden enters in a striking black gown, armed with her dagger, all eyes are drawn to her. Kai feels captivated and consumed by jealousy when she looks at Kit, realizing the depth of his feelings and seeing her as both his desire and downfall, symbolizing their dangerous connection. In Chapter 51, Peden focuses on her mission during the ball, stealing the key to the tunnels from Kit's pocket while dancing with him, then discreetly passing it to Lenny, who reassures her he's ready for their plan. Despite her success, Peden struggles with guilt over betraying Kit's trust. She tries to keep her distance from Kai, but their intense chemistry resurfaces when they dance together. Kai confronts her about pushing him away, and she feels torn, drawn to him, yet terrified, because if he knew her true identity, he'd be her executioner. Jax interrupts, offering a compliment, allowing her to escape the tension. Overwhelmed by the crowded ballroom, Peden heads for the courtyard to get some air, only to have a flash suddenly appear and block her path, ending the chapter on a moment of suspense. In Chapter 52, Peden is stopped by a drunken Imperial guard while trying to get fresh air, but Kai intervenes, threatening the man and ensuring her release. Outside, Peden revels in the rain, recalling her childhood in Loot and briefly feeling free. Kai joins her, teasingly protective, and shields her with his coat. They share a deeply intimate conversation where Kai confesses his feelings, telling her he can't stop thinking about her and wants to call her his. Peden lies, denying she feels the same, but Kai catches her nervous tell, revealing he knows she's lying. The tension escalates as Kai touches her gently, teases her about a promise she made that he could touch her sober, and admits he's never sober around her because of how much she affects him. The chapter ends with Peden challenging him to kiss her, hinting at their growing emotional and romantic connection. In Chapter 53, Kai and Peden share a tender, rain-soaked moment, nearly kissing before an Imperial interrupts, summoning Kai on the king's orders. Kai leaves reluctantly, only to find the matter was not urgent but a ploy to separate him from Peden. In the ballroom, the king confronts Kai, criticizing him for chasing a slummer and warning he could be forced to kill her in the next trial. Tension escalates as Kai struggles to control his powers and anger, recalling his brutal upbringing under his father's harsh training. Kit intervenes, diffusing the confrontation and guiding their father away, showing his role as a peacekeeper and his desire for approval. Kai reflects on his resentment toward his father and his own lack of interest in earning his love. He realizes Peden has likely been sent to her chambers under the king's orders, but resolves that no one can keep him away from her. In Chapter 54, the purging trials reach their final stage as Kai and the remaining contestants are escorted from the castle to the bowl arena. Unlike previous trials, they are awake and escorted under heavy guard with a roaring crowd watching from the stands. At the arena's center lies a massive, shifting hedge maze controlled by bloom manipulators. The king announces the final challenge. Contestants must navigate the maze and be the first to reach its center, where they must kill a condemned prisoner to win. The announcement ensures the trial will be deadly and dramatic, pleasing the crowd. Each contestant is led to a separate maze entrance. As Kai is positioned, he spots Peden across the arena, their eyes locking in a silent exchange of acknowledgement and support. They share a private moment, exchanging a symbolic air flick before being separated to begin the deadly trial, where survival and victory are at stake. In Chapter 55, Peden enters the deadly hedge maze for the final trial, determined to survive. The maze constantly shifts, creating dead ends and narrowing paths. As she navigates, the foliage traps her foot, leaving it torn and bleeding. Peden painfully frees herself, bandages the injury with her torn tank top, and continues limping forward, aware the injury could have been worse. The maze's design becomes increasingly claustrophobic, its paths narrowing to barely shoulder width, clearly intended to force brutal confrontations. The king's cruelty is evident, as the trial is meant to entertain spectators by pitting contestants against each other in tight, shifting corridors. Peden's anxiety and claustrophobia intensify as she hears a scream, confirming the deadly intent of the game. Despite her pain and fear, she pushes forward, only to be confronted by another contestant with venomous intent, eager to kill her before the trial's end. The confrontation signals the fight for survival is imminent. In Chapter 56, Kai navigates the deadly shifting maze, frustrated by dead ends and near crushes from the moving walls. He encounters his cousin Andy in Jaguar form, realizing she is losing control of her ability. Unable to evade her in the tight space, Kai uses Jax's blink power briefly, but loses it when Jax moves out of range. Forced to defend himself, Kai shifts into a Jaguar, engaging Andy in a brutal animal fight. He nearly kills her before regaining control of himself. Andy shifts into a Falcon to escape, but is blocked by a dome of foliage over the maze, then flees in Jaguar form. Kai shifts back, badly wounded, and bandages his bleeding shoulder. Determined to continue, he pushes forward through the maze, following screams and sensing a nearby power. As he reaches for it, a smile forms on his bloodied face, signaling a potential advantage as the trial intensifies. In Chapter 57, Pedin is confronted by Blair in the shifting maze. Blair uses her telekinetic power to choke and lift Pedin into the air, taunting her. Struggling to breathe, Pedin provokes Blair by mentioning her rejection by both princes, Kai and Kit, enraging her enough to switch to physical attacks. Blair throws Pedin to the ground and kicks her, but Pedin seizes an opening, twisting Blair's leg and pinning her. Using her father's ring, Pedin delivers a powerful punch to Blair's temple, knocking her unconscious. Injured but determined, Pedin flees before Blair regains consciousness, pushing through pain and exhaustion as the maze shifts around her. She navigates multiple dead ends and witnesses sights recording the violence, feeling sympathy for them. After more running, she finds herself at an open sandy circle, the center of the maze and the key to victory. The chapter ends with Pedin reaching her critical destination. In Chapter 58, Kai uses a Bloom's power to dismantle sections of the shifting maze, tearing down walls and creating a clear path toward the center. The crowd roars as they witness his destruction, but the power begins to flicker as the Blooms retreat out of his range. Forcing his way through the damaged hedges, Kai presses forward while the maze repairs itself behind him. He finally reaches the open circle at the maze's center, where the final confrontation is set to take place. There, he sees two figures, Pedin, bloodied and limping but still pushing herself forward, and the criminal marked for execution. Pedin's focus is entirely on the figure in the center, and she suddenly sprints toward them with determination. The chapter ends with Kai arriving at the crucial battleground, setting the stage for the trial's deadly conclusion and revealing the stakes of this final confrontation. In Chapter 59, Pedin reaches the maze's center and finds Adina bound, beaten, and bleeding. Horrified, she rushes toward her best friend, but Blair uses her telekinetic power to hurl a blunt branch through Adina's chest, fatally wounding her. Pedin catches Adina as she collapses, holding her in her lap while begging for help that doesn't come, the crowd cheering instead of intervening. Adina comforts Pedin despite her own pain, asking Pedin to wear the green vest she had made for her and assuring her this isn't a true goodbye. Pedin promises never to forget her, devastated by the realization that Adina's death is her fault for bringing her to the trials. Adina dies in Pedin's arms with a soft smile, leaving Pedin sobbing and heartbroken. This moment marks a devastating turning point for Pedin, fueling her grief, guilt, and anger as she loses the only person who truly knew her. In Chapter 60, Kai watches in anguish as Pedin grieves over Adina's lifeless body after Blair kills her to win the trial. Kai approaches Pedin, torn between wanting to comfort her and feeling helpless. Jax and Andy arrive in the circle, Andy bloodied and disoriented from shifting back to human form. Suddenly, the crowd's cheers turn into screams as chaos erupts. Black-masked resistance fighters appear, blocking exits and holding the audience hostage under the suppressing power of a mute. In the royal box, masked silencers hold the king, queen, and Kit at knife point, using their abilities to strip them of their powers. Kai recognizes their expressions of agony, understanding the pain of being suppressed. As the attack intensifies, he feels the crushing power of the silencers himself. The chapter ends with Kai realizing the resistance has infiltrated the trials, shifting the event from a deadly competition to a full-scale uprising. In Chapter 61, Pedin grieves over Adina's broken body, vowing vengeance on Blair and the king for orchestrating her death. The maze vanishes, revealing the contestants as chaos erupts in the stands. Resistance fighters, led by Callum, take control, holding the king, queen, and Kit hostage with silencers suppressing all powers. Pedin realizes Kit knows she betrayed him, seeing his cold hatred. Callum publicly reveals the Resistance's existence, exposing the king's lies and declaring themselves ordinaries and fatals who have secretly lived among elites for years. He urges unity, offering peace if the king accepts, but threatens the prince's lives, enraging the crowd and jeopardizing their cause. Payton panics, realizing this wasn't part of the plan. As tension rises, a silencer near Kai suddenly stiffens and Kai erupts in flames, breaking free from the suppression. The chapter ends with the arena in shock as Kai's unleashed power shifts the entire situation. In Chapter 62, Kai and the other contestants are subdued by silencers, while Padden remains unaffected but suspiciously unguarded. Kai struggles under the crushing power suppression, his head pounding as he listens to Callum's speech about ordinaries wanting equality despite their supposed disease. Confused by the lack of any power loss among elites, Kai focuses on the silencer suppressing him. Using training with Damien, he latches onto the silencer's ability and turns it against him. The silencer, caught off guard, loses control, and Kai breaks free of the suppression. Fully regaining his powers, Kai unleashes his flames, consuming the silencer and regaining his strength. In Chapter 63, chaos erupts in the arena as Kai breaks free from the silencer's suppression, using their own power against them and unleashing flames that disrupt the Resistance's plan. The Imperials gain the upper hand, outnumbering and overwhelming the Resistance forces. Payton, grieving Adina's death, lays her friend's body down and flees the bowl, haunted by guilt and memories of her father's similar death. She escapes through the panicked crowd, leveraging her loot-honed stealth to reach the castle, where she tricks Imperials into escorting her to her room. After knocking out a healer sent to treat her injuries, Payton retrieves Adina's handmade vest, honoring her promise to wear it. She sneaks through the castle and heads toward loot, but encounters the king on the path alone and bloodied. He taunts her about her father's death, Adina's murder, and her betrayal, declaring her useless and vowing to kill her himself, drawing his sword. In Chapter 64, Kai fights his way through the chaotic battle between the Resistance, Fatals, Ordinaries, and Imperials in the bowl. Covered in blood, he efficiently kills attackers, relying mostly on combat skills rather than abilities, though he senses the powerful presence of nearby Fatals. The Resistance is outnumbered, and despite their strength, the Imperials begin to gain control. Kai notices his brother Kit fighting with uncharacteristic brutality, consumed by rage, which unsettles him. Scanning the battlefield, Kai realizes their parents are missing, hoping they were escorted safely back to the castle. He observes that the number of fighters is dwindling, and then spots Resistance members fleeing through a tunnel leading out of the arena. Determined not to let them escape, Kai pushes forward through the thinning crowd, intent on pursuing them beyond the bowl. The chapter highlights the Resistance's weakening position, Kit's transformation, and Kai's relentless resolve to chase the fleeing enemies. In Chapter 65, Payton faces the king in a brutal fight. He overpowers her with his strength, wounding her severely and carving into her skin, branding her before killing her. Despite her injuries, she manages to disarm and injure him, turning the fight in her favor. The king taunts her, claiming he wasn't the one who killed her father, and reveals it was Kai's first kill, leaving Payton shaken but determined. Refusing to be distracted, she stabs the king through the chest with his own sword, declaring vengeance for her father and Adina. She retrieves her father's dagger and delivers a final, fatal throw, killing the king. The chapter closes with Payton bloodied but resolute, having avenged her loved ones and ended the life of the man who oppressed her people. In Chapter 66, Payton kills the king by throwing her father's dagger into his throat but is seen by a sight who runs off to report her. She flees, leaving the dagger behind, but is intercepted by Kai, who now realizes she killed his father. Their shared history resurfaces as Payton recalls Kai was the one who killed her father under the king's orders. Kai, torn between vengeance and feelings for Payton, aims his knife at her but hesitates, conflicted and enraged. Instead of killing her, he spares her life, warning her to run while vowing to hunt her down and not hesitate next time. Overcome with emotion and pain, Payton flees as Kai kneels by his father's body, watching her go. The scene closes with their relationship shattered, vengeance promised, and Payton running for her life as Kai's grief and fury consume him. In Chapter 67, Kai watches Payton flee after killing the king, his father. He kneels by the king's lifeless body, closing his father's eyes while clutching Payton's bloodied dagger. Shocked, numb, and betrayed, He realizes she is an ordinary and part of the resistance, something he should have seen but ignored because of his feelings for her. Despite being trained to kill, Kai let her go, overwhelmed by his emotions. Now, with the weight of his enforcer title pressing heavily on him, he vows to find her, regain his courage, and avenge his father's death. In Chapter 68, Pedin flees into the woods, battered and bleeding, unable to escape the pain of her wounds or her memories. She traces the deep cuts on her body, focusing on the O carved into her chest, a permanent brand marking her as ordinary. Weighed down by trauma, she stumbles through the rain, haunted by Kai's touch and his betrayal. A cluster of forget-me-nots reminds her of their stolen moments and his promise that she'd remember who he was to her. Now, he hunts her with her father's dagger, and she sees him as both her lover and her father's murderer. Overcome with grief and exhaustion, Pedin continues forward, tears mixing with rain and blood as she struggles to survive. Epilogue. 3 days after the king's death and the Resistance's attack, Kit ascends the throne and struggles with grief, exhaustion, and anger. His father's burial is complete, his coronation finalized, and he now officially rules with Kai as his enforcer. Kit reflects on his father's influence and the betrayal of Peyton Grey, who killed the king and shattered their trust. Determined to honor his father's legacy, Kit gives Kai his first mission as enforcer, to find Pedin and bring her to him. Kai solemnly accepts the order, and Kit takes his father's seat, fully embracing his role as king and vowing justice.